Okay, Professor Bear here. I'm going to talk about the Chinese room argument, experiment, thought experiment. A philosopher named John Searle proposed this in 1980 in response to a Turing test. The MIDI Turing test, basically, Turing, who's just a super genius, argued that if, like a chatbot, what we use now seem intelligent, that is, if you were blind, if you didn't know a robot was talking to you and just spoke to it, and it responded in a way that seemed human, that most people would think is human, then that would be an intelligence test. And Searle had an interesting response to that, particularly in the context of modern language models. So what his thought experiment was, assume he's a philosopher in a room, locked in a room somewhere, and there's a native Chinese speaker sort of just putting in message after message after message.
Do you speak Chinese?
And then he just looks it up in a very big book. And one of the original criticism of his argument, well, it's mathematically impossible to do that. Well, this is essentially what LLMs do now. You put in some text and over an internet scale database, they try to match the best response to that. So what's particularly interesting about Searle's argument, it's essentially how modern language models work, sort of. And so he's arguing that if you just look things up and just pass back correct responses, that's not intelligence. That doesn't mean it's not super useful. Language models are super useful. But his argument was basically that just passing a Turing test or a mini Turing test doesn't mean intelligence. And what's striking about sort of his argument is in the context of modern language models, it's kind of what they do, but they're probabilistic. So you put in some text and it finds the next best match and the next best match and the next best match, but they're amazingly human. They're amazingly, responsive, like you were talking to a person. I would argue that modern language models have passed the mini Turing test. That if you didn't know a language model existed and you just sort of typed in a chatbot and it gave you the responses language models do, particularly 5 or 10 years ago, you wouldn't have guessed it was a language model. You'd have guessed it was a human being. And so what makes this interesting also is how does intelligence occur? Because what language models are also doing now is they may have a little emergent behavior. They're now doing some reasoning, and that may come from not the fact that they're looking things up, but emergent properties of scale. So this video is mainly a shout out to Searle, who sort of predicted language models in 1980. He was, basically criticized mathematically. It just can't happen because it's just mathematically, computationally impossible to do a lookup of, for example, Chinese. But I can ask a language model now I can either put in Chinese and it'll tell me what it means, it gives me a response, or ask it to translate something in Chinese or Portuguese or French or whatever, and it does. So this is just a shout out to Searle, a shout out to sort of people who've been thinking about this stuff for a long, long time. So that's it. This is Professor Bear. I highly recommend that you look up Searle's work. I tried my best in these illustrations to make an accurate caricature of John Searle. But that's it. Take care. Hope this was useful.